Hi there guys, got a video here for you today on machining a Lothar Walther barrel blank to fit an FX Impact. So as some of you already know, we've already got a BSA barrel in the FX Impact, but that's on the M3. What I want this one to go in is either the Mark II or the Mark I. Right then, so this is the barrel blank as purchased. It's a Lothar Walther, it's rifled. I don't know if the camera will pick that up, but it's a rifled barrel, 16mm in diameter. Purchased from Chambers Gunsmiths, and these come in at 600mm long from the factory. We're going to have to cut it down to 500. I suppose we could leave it at 600 if we wanted to, but to machine it properly I'm going to cut it down to 500. Right then, so I'll just give you a quick run through of what we've got to do. We've got to put a 1/2 inch UNF on the choke end, and that'll be where the shroud attaches to, and then on the lead end we've got to machine an O-ring groove, machine out the transfer porthole, and then finish off turning the OD. On FX barrels they've got a turn down section so that it fits in the breech nicely, and we're just going to be copying it straight onto the barrel blank. Now on the BSA barrel I did put a brass transfer port on, but I'm not going to be doing that this time. What I'll be doing is just machining the features directly into the barrel. I think that's going to be a better way of doing it. So we've got a couple external O-ring grooves to make, an internal one, and we've also got to sort out the rifling in the lead. And of course lastly, since this is 16mm in diameter, we do have to turn the OD down to 14mm to get it to go through the blocks on the impact. So I'll probably turn that between centres, get it nice and concentric with a bore, and hopefully it should be a nice little job. Right then, let's get started. So the first operation was to cut it down to length, and I just did that quickly off camera. Obviously as this is a choked barrel I just cut the breech end off, and we'll remachine the breech and the lead at a later date, and I'm just facing the end to improve the surface finish. Right then, so now that the barrel is cut to length, what we've got to do is align the axis of the bore with the axis of the lathe. Now there's lots of different ways to do this, but this is just the way I do it. So I use a spider, or some people call them bell chucks. So what this allows us to do, these two sets of bolts here, is adjust the concentricity of the barrel over two different points. Specifically what we're interested in is the bore. Once the bore is concentric over two different points, that ensures that the axis of the barrel is aligned with the axis of the lathe over those 2 points. Now we need to do this because the OD of the barrels here isn't always in line with the bore. I have measured this one and it is pretty good, and if I'm honest, for an air gun we probably could just chuck it up in the 3-jaw, cut the 1/2 inch UNF on it and never have a problem. So I'll probably do most of this off camera as it is a very tedious job, but what we do is we wind the carriage in until the end of the stylus goes into the bore, can then zero out the DTI. Then as we turn it, you see there, I don't know how well the camera is going to pick that up, but we've got about 0.1 of a millimetre of overall deviation, so I need to adjust that out. And if we go further into the bore, I like that little stop there, we see it's a bit further out in there. So what that tells us is the axis of the barrel isn't aligned with the axis of the lathe. So we've got about 0.3 of a millimetre run out at this location, and about 0.1 at this location. So to align the outside or very end of the barrel, what we need to do is adjust these screws here, and when we move the carriage in further we'll adjust these screws here to adjust that run out. So with a little adjustment there we've got these two opposed bolts running nicely. When you're watching the indicator we're only interested in the very high spots, and that's the top of the rifling. And to adjust this outer one, what we're doing is loosening the highs and tightening the lows. Obviously we're using this front pin as a pivot point, so we're sort of moving the back of the barrel rather than the front. So there's a little backwards, and it does take a little bit of getting used to, if I'm honest. I don't know how well the camera's going to pick that up, but we're about 40 microns of run out there. So like I said, we're only interested in the high measurements. About 30 or 40 microns to go, but we're going to leave that as it is. So that's the outer. we'll move the carriage in just to that slot there. See what it's running like. So that inner one's quite a ways out. So back to these bolts, I'll adjust them. I'll probably do all this off camera, it's quite tedious work. And then I'll bring you back once we're running nice and true. Right then guys, so I'm pretty happy with how we've got it now. So this is the in position. It's repeating back pretty darn well. Maybe a few microns out, but we can live with that. It's not guaranteed that the lands are all the right height, so being a bit picky, you could pick out a higher one there, but again that might just be that particular high spot in the barrel. That piece of the rifling might be a little harder than the other ones, so we're going to leave that there. And then on the outer position, the very end, again probably about 5 microns run out there, but I think that will be well good enough. What I'll do is I'll just put the indicator on the OD there and I'll show you exactly how far out this barrel is from the bore. Right then, there's the indicator on the OD of the barrel. A little disappointed actually, this barrel is pretty darn good. They can be miles out. Once it's all set up in the spider, we can start turning the 1/2 inch UNF. So first we're just turning down the face of the barrel and setting our 0 stop. Once it's face down we can start turning down the OD. So we're cutting a 1/2 inch UNF on it, so the OD needs to be 12.7 or just under. I like to cut my 1/2 inch UNFs 12mm long. That gives 10mm for the threads and a 2mm thread gutter. With the barrel set up in the spider we have to take lots of light passes. Obviously we spent quite a lot of time setting it up, so we definitely don't want to take too heavy a pass and risk messing up that setup time. Once that's all done we can cut the thread gutter, and that's just using a grooving tool, chamfer the end and then do the final pass along the thread face. That shoulder there is what's used to align the moderator with the barrel. Obviously a thread on its own is not a very good alignment tool, so having a shoulder which the moderator butts up to just helps keep the moderator or shroud parallel to the bore. Next we can start threading. Now when I'm threading I'm taking very light passes, and that just minimises the chance that the barrel is going to become misaligned. And then when we're getting near I check it with a thread gauge. I've got a 1/2 inch UNF go gauge which I use for this, and once that screws on nice and freely then we know the thread's to the correct depth. Right then, so the 1/2 inch UNF has been cut and we're ready to crown the barrel. And the way I cut my crowns is with a cut-off disc in the tool post grinder. And we've set the cutter position by using the tailstock, just getting it nice and close. It's cutting up and away from the bore so we don't get a burr on the inside of the barrel. And we're just going to touch it on there and create a little crown. For an air rifle crown I really don't think the 7 or 11 degree crown really matters that much. What's much more important is that the pellet has a clean exit to the end of the barrel. Next up we're putting our little brass protection sleeve over the end of the barrel. Now obviously we spent quite a lot of time setting up the barrel and getting that crown nice, so we don't want to come in there with a centre and potentially ruin the work we've already done. So what I like to do is make a female mandrel. So this is just in brass with a 1/2 inch UNF thread on it. We screw that on there, face the end and then centre drill it. So for this next part I have to apologise for the camera angle. I didn't realise it was going to be focused on that little stud there, but you can't really see anything anyway as the tool is in the bore of the barrel. So what I've done is I've spun the barrel around in the spider, reset it up, and we're now cutting what would be the lead end. And what I'm doing is just taking out the rifling for the first 17mm of the barrel. So we've got a few features that are going to be present in the breech, such as the transfer port O-ring and the transfer port itself. So I like to cut the rifling out of these places so that the pellet's not going through interrupted rifling. We'll do our usual tricks with a barrel, we'll give it a good polish up and we'll also sort the lead out. So the pellet's got a nice lead into the rifling rather than a sharp beginning. The second reason for taking out the rifling in the beginning of the barrel is just to allow for any misalignment with the pellet probe. But we're not taking much out, we're just literally taking out the high points of the rifling. I take mine out to around 4.8mm. This allows a pellet to feed in there nicely, but it hasn't got room to jump around. And because it's a very small hole, I'm just using some drill shanks to measure the hole. And once we get near the final size, I'm just using a ball gauge. Now for probably one of the trickier jobs on the barrel, and that's cutting the breech O-ring. Now I'm using a 4.5mm internal O-ring, so we need a little bit of squeeze on that, as the pellet probe itself is around 4.4 to 4.3, and I'm just taking it nice and slow. Obviously to go in that bore we're using a very small cutter. It's less than 1mm wide. The width of the groove we're cutting is 1.6mm, so we're taking that in 3 passes. So what I've done with this O-ring groove is taking it out a little small, then we'll put an O-ring in there and test the fit. I don't want a lot of grab on this O-ring, I just want a nice sliding fit, and that's what we got in the end. You can feel a small amount of pressure on the pellet probe itself, but it's not grabbing and it's not difficult to get in the hole. The last thing we did was just cut a 30-degree angle on there so that we can put that in a centre. As we're going to be turning the barrel between centres, we need a centre mark on each end. So next I've got a drive dog on one end, and we just turn it between centres. Now because of the drive dog on one end, we're not going to be able to do it all in one pass. So what I'm doing is splitting it up into 2 pieces. The first passes we're going to be taking out is the majority of the work, and this will be from the choke end right back to near the breech. And then the second operation we're going to do is turn the breech end. So this on an FX barrel would be the steel part and the brass transfer port. On this barrel I've grouped them 2 pieces together, so we're going to be turning them as one lump. Now I'm turning this barrel straight between centres. We could set up a steady rest if we wanted to, but I find them more of a hindrance than anything, so I just turn without one. So for the roughing passes we're going to be turning the lathe at about 250 RPM and feeding nice and slowly. It's 2mm to take off, so the first roughing pass I took was a millimetre, and then the subsequent passes will have to take a lot less. The millimetre pass removes most of the material, but it also puts a little bit of heat into the barrel. This causes it to expand and sort of bow out in the middle. So the first pass we take is a roughing pass, and then the last millimetre we take nice and slow, probably a 1/4 mil at a time. Get it right down to size, with the final pass being as slow as the lathe can go and the finest feed available. You don't get a perfect ground finish when doing it like this, but it's good enough for a barrel. I'm not sure if I'm going to blue this barrel yet or not. Home bluing always comes out a bit funny. Hasn't got that deep blue that hot bluing does, so I might just polish it up and leave it shiny. But that'll be coming in the next video. So thanks a lot for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next one.